Hi guys. Um, since the last pot that I fired cracked, it's time to move on to the next project. The crack has gotten a little bit bigger since it's all cooled down. So I'm going to make the next pot in the Ancient Pottery Challenge, and that will be using this Pookie. But before any of that, I'm out of clay. This is all the clay that I have left. So I'm going to have to make up a whole new batch. So I'm going to take you along and show you how that's done. Okay, I got my bucket of clay here, or dry processed clay, and I have what's left of my grog. Now, grog is just broken up pieces of pottery that haven't make it. So this pot right here will most likely be turned into grog. And all you need to do is just take those pieces and grind them on a stone like a cinder block or something like that, smash it up, and then I sift it through a sifter like this, and that's it. That's grog. Grog is also a type of temper. So in order to make good clay, you need to take the raw clay and mix it with the temper. Now, my last batch of clay, I think I had too much temper in it. So I am going to change the formula a little bit. I'm going to use 5 scoops of just a cup, 5 scoops of this dried clay, along to 1 scoop of the temper. And I'll just mix that together in this bucket here. Sorry guys, I got the formula wrong. It's actually 5 parts total. And it's 4 parts of the clay and 1 part of the temper. In this case, it's grog. So I've mixed that all, or I put that all in a bucket. I've also put a mask on so that the dust doesn't get me. And I'm just going to stir this up and then add a little bit of water to here. And you want to add water pretty slowly because this can get sloppy real quick. So I'll just fill up my cup, and it won't even take a full cup to make this clay. So I'll probably fill it up halfway and start mixing it in slowly. So after adding about 3/4 of the cup that I was using, I got this mix here, which kind of looks like the topping of a crumb cake. So I just poured out about 1/5 of the whole batch here, and I'm just going to start mixing it with my hands to try to get it to come into somewhat of a doughy type consistency. I don't want to over wet it because then I got to wait longer till I can work with it. So I am just going to kind of roll this thing up, make a ball out of it, maybe sprinkle or spray, use a spray bottle to maybe give it a little spritz here and there, just to get it all combined together. And I'll do this to, as many times as I have to get through the whole bucket here. And then I'll bring them all together and start kneading it or wedging the clay so it gets rid of all the air bubbles. But if I found that if I do this all at once, it's too much. It just gets too messy. Clay goes all over the place, so I do it in little chunks. All right, so I'm going to do this for the remaining part of the batch, and we'll catch up then. So here we are. I had got 3 balls out of that one batch. And by looking at it, these are about 2-pound balls, and that's maybe 1.5 pound ball. So that's the amount of clay that I get when I'm using these cups and using the 4:1 ratio of dry processed clay to temper. So you'll notice when you're working with this stuff that the water keeps absorbing into the clay. And right now it's just wet enough to make these balls, but they're still pretty dry. So I'm going to do my best to combine these, add a little bit more water. Right now you can see that it's fairly firm, but it's still a little dry. So I'm just going to keep working these for a few minutes. I'm going to knead them together and try to get one big ball out of this and keep it moist, but it should only be like that dry or that wet. So it just kind of comes off in your hands just a little bit. You don't want it too wet. And the reason why I'm putting these all together is because right now there's different moisture content in each one of these, which means it'll dry uneven. So I'm putting it all together so it's all has the same moisture content. That's very important. And then I'm probably split it back up into 3 separate balls or 2 balls just to make it easier to work with. All right, so now I have my combined ball of clay here. It's still, if I were to squeeze this, you can see that it's still just a little bit dry. So I'm going to add this to the plastic bag here, and I'm going to squirt some water in there with my water bottle and let that sit for a while. I'm going to let the water do its job, combine with the clay, and then and I could probably start working with this within an hour, but since it's cold down here, I probably won't get back to this until tomorrow. Well, it's the next day, and let's just see what we have here. Open this up. You can see the clay is a lot wetter. I have time to absorb some of the water that I put in here, and I'm just going to sit here and wedge this again, and then we'll get started. Okay, I've started with rolling out a little patty here. It's about as big as my hand. It's, probably a 1/4 inch thick, nice and flat. And then I'm just going to lay that in to the pookie that we made last time. So I just want to get this centered up. And all the pookie's job is to hold the clay while we build up the coils. And since it's going to be a round shape, it's going to keep that shape round. And it will stay that way until the clay is hard enough to support itself. So the first thing I want to do now is make a coil. All right, and I'll just, show you real briefly how I do it. I need 2 hands to do this, but you're just basically rolling it out, squeezing it together, rolling it out, and then we'll end up putting this around the clay and pinching it into the patty just by pushing down on it with my thumb. Okay, that's how we'll do it. Now I got to do this with 2 hands, so I'm going to restart and make a coil that goes all the way around and start to pinching it into the patty. I'll catch up with you at that point. Okay, I've got the coil all the way around, and you can see it's a little thick here, and you'll see this seam that goes all the way around. Now I'm going to use a wood scraper to obliterate that seam, to blend that in, and to thin out my wall here a little bit. You could use anything. You could use a gourd scraper, you could use a credit card, you could use a spoon, you could just use your thumb. So, it's whatever you have laying around. And all I'm going to do is just go through here, dip it in a little water first, shake off the excess, and just smooth this out. As you can see, it doesn't take much to get rid of that line. And I'm just going to go all the way around the bowl, and then I'm going to push this up a little bit to make this a 1/4 inch wall just like the base. So it's just moving it up and down, spinning the bowl around and getting it to the corners here, and just kind of moving this around. Okay, here it is all smoothed out. I got about a 1/4 inch wall here going around the bowl. There's still some lines, but I'll be scraping this many times. I'm not going to worry about it right now. The next step is to create another coil about 1 inch thick, and we're going to roll it around the edge again and come back to where we have to obliterate that seam again. So it's just a matter of rolling out a coil, pushing it on top, pushing it in with my finger, and then scraping the line. And then I'll make sure that the wall is about a 1/4 inch thickness. This time I'm trying to go above the rim a little bit, maybe a 1/2 inch above the rim here, so that we can see how this is going to start shaping out. Here's the next coil added, and I will just scrape and smooth out the rim with a little bit of water. I'll just put my finger in the water and just rub the edge a little bit just to smooth it out, just so I have a good place to contact the next row. It's just simple as that. Just rub a little water on it and it'll get rid of those cracks. So I am going to pinch up these walls to make them about a 1/4 inch thick, and I'm going to scrape the inside of this seam to get rid of that seam. And then on the outside you can see that we're up about a 1/2 inch from the rim now. So this is where our bowl starts taking shape, and we can build onto this. So here we are at finishing the scraping on the inside, smoothing out the rim, and scraping the outside now. Because the outside will start to have cracks in it, and all you need to do is add a little bit of water and scrape that to try to get those cracks eliminated. Now, as you can see here, my rim is not very flat, and this is okay for me right now because I'm going to add another row. But you may want to use a needle tool, if I can find it. Hold on a second. Okay, here's my needle tool. This is one I made. I just took a piece of dowel, and I took a needle from the sewing store and just shoved it in there with some glue. And all you have to do is just kind of mark on the outside, all the way around, and you can straighten up that rim to make it kind of flat, so that if your coils start to lean one way, this will certainly straighten it out. I'm not going to do that on this pot because this is just a demonstration video, but if I was really working at it, I would probably clean this up, make sure that all the rim is the same equal thickness all the way around, and that will give you a better, stronger pot. Here I've added another coil, and you can see this is pretty messy. I got a lot of cracks in here. My clay's starting to dry out a little bit, and I just wanted to let you know that's okay. You just keep working it, put a little water on your finger, get it in there, and smooth it out. The other thing I want to let you know is in the bottom of your bowl, water will start to collect. You want to use a paper towel or something to get that out of there, because that will drill a hole right through to the bottom and make that a weak spot. So you just want to keep that water out of the bottom and just keep working the rim around with your scraping tool and a wet finger, and get it to the point where you like it. So I've now gotten the rim to where I like it. It's never perfect, and I'm going to go over this time and time again. So right now I'm just trying to get the shape right and get rid of all the cracks, so when it dries, those cracks don't open up. Right now the rim is a little floppy, a little loose, so I'm going to let this sit probably overnight again and let it firm up a little bit, and then we'll come back and we'll finish up the top. The other thing is, there's no shame in taking a little piece of clay and putting it into a wall where you pinched a little too tight and making that thick again. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. You're trying to get a nice even wall. It doesn't matter how you got there. It's just we want to make sure that it's uniform all around so that it dries correctly. So right now I'm just going to stop the video here, put a bag, just a regular plastic bag over top of this work so it dries out slowly, and I'll come back later to finish up the top. All right, it's morning, and this is sat overnight to firm up. Hopefully it's not too dry. We still want it to be pliable so that we can add the next row. We don't want it to be completely dried out, because if we add wet clay to dry clay, more than likely it's going to crack at that point because of the different drying rates. So let's just uncover this and see where we are. You can see, or at least I can see, that it's much firmer. It's probably at the leather hard stage, which is okay, which is exactly where we want it to be. It's nice and supported at this point. I can build another 2 rows on here of coils, and that's just what we need. Now, with this point of the Pookie, almost every bowl is going to look like this in some way, shape, or form. It's at this point where we either go up higher, we go out, we go in, we, do something to make this different. But most pots that are built in a Pookie are going to look just like this. It's a round form that goes up and around and stops. And from here is where we can go in whatever direction we want to. So today we're going to be going in, and then we're going to be going out to make the hokum bowl or hokum jar. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to build a coil up here next. I'm going to, score this up a little bit with my, excuse me, my needle tool. Put a little water on there and build the next row. So here I've added the next coil, and I started to smooth it out and close it in. And all I was doing was just putting the coil in and pinching, towards me, trying to make that wall thin. And apparently I am too forceful with doing this, and I broke the Pookie. This was the original crack over here. Didn't crack there. It cracked in another spot. And with doing that crack, the bottom kind of cracked as well. So I don't think this jar is going to hold up into the firing. It's the same thing that happened to the other bowl. But with that point, I was polishing. That's where you rub a piece of metal or stone against this to make this a shiny background or shiny coat on the clay body. So another fail. Right now, if I were to let this sit and harden, it's going to harden with that crack, and that crack's just going to open up. So rather than firing this at and have it crack, I am just going to crumple it up and start over. But I'll need a new Pookie. So either I can repair this Pookie, or I will have to replace it. So, this is just the way it goes sometimes with me. I'm just a little too forceful when I was pushing it. I must have pushed it like this when I was scraping it, and that put pressure on the bowl here and just blew it apart. In the words of the immortal Bob Ross, there are no mistakes, only happy accidents. Let's look at this and see what's going on here with this broken Pookie. So if I hold it up, it does look like everything did fire. I mean, I got firing all the way through, which means I believe it was a good firing, which leads me to what I had said earlier about the last batch having too much grog. Well, I think this is the case of having too much grog. It weakens the clay. And this was part of that batch. So I think I just did not have enough clay in here. So I think that's what's going on. You never know. It could have been moisture. It could have been, the way it was made. It could have been all sorts of things. But that's what I'm going with. I'll make this a teaching moment and say that I had put too much grog into this batch. I think it was more than 30% grog. So I am using the new batch, which is about 20% grog. So I will make a new Pookie from this batch, and I will try to redo the jar from this batch as well. So again, another happy accident of this is, well, if you don't have a Pookie, what do? I mean, look at this. This is just falling apart here. I'm going to show you what I do if I don't have a Pookie. I'm just going to grab a bowl and, go from there.